Paradise Lost by John Milton. Read by Anton Lesser. Book 1, The Argument. This first book proposes, first in brief, the whole subject, man's disobedience, and the loss thereupon of paradise wherein he was placed. Then touches the prime cause of his fall, the serpent, or rather Satan in the serpent, who, revolting from God, and drawing to his side many legions of angels, was by the command of God driven out of heaven with all his crew into the great deep. Which action passed over, the poem hastes into the midst of things, presenting Satan with his angels now fallen into hell, described here not in the centre, for heaven and earth may be supposed as yet not made, certainly not yet accursed, but in a place of utter darkness, fitliest called chaos. Here Satan with his angels lying on the burning lake, thunderstruck and astonished, after a certain space recovers, as from confusion, calls up him who next in order and dignity lay by him. They confer of their miserable fall. Satan awakens all his legions who lay till then in the same manner confounded. They rise. Their numbers, array of battle, their chief leaders named, according to the idols known afterwards in Canaan and the countries adjoining. To these Satan directs his speech, comforts them with hope yet of regaining heaven, but tells them lastly of a new world, a new kind of creature to be created, according to an ancient prophecy or report in heaven. For that angels were long before this visible creation was the opinion of many ancient fathers. To find out the truth of this prophecy, and what to determine thereon, he refers to a full council. What his associates thence attempt. Pandemonium, the palace of Satan, rises, suddenly built out of the deep. The infernal peers there sit in council. Book 1. Of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe, with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat, sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb or of Sinai didst inspire that shepherd, who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. Or if Sion hill delight thee more, and Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurer's song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeonian mount, while it pursues things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. And chiefly thou, O Spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou knowest, thou from the first wast present, and with mighty wings outspread, dove-like satst brooding on the vast abyss, and madest it pregnant. What in me is dark, illumine. What is low, raise and support, that to the height of this great argument I may assert eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men. Say first, for heaven hides nothing from thy view, nor the deep tract of hell. Say first, what cause moved our grandparents in that happy state, favoured of heaven so highly, to fall off from their Creator and transgress his will, for one restraint, lords of the world besides. Who first seduced them to that foul revolt? The infernal serpent. He it was whose guile, stirred up with envy and revenge, deceived the mother of mankind, what time his pride had cast him out from heaven, with all his host of rebel angels, by whose aid, aspiring to set himself in glory above his peers, he trusted to have equalled the Most High, if he opposed, and with ambitious aim against the throne and monarchy of God, raised impious war in heaven, and battle proud with vain attempt. Him the almighty power hurled headlong, flaming from the ethereal sky, with hideous ruin and combustion, down to bottomless perdition, there to dwell in adamantine chains and penal fire, who durst defy the omnipotent to arms. 9 times the space that measures day and night to mortal men, he, with his horrid crew, lay vanquished, rolling in the fiery gulf, confounded, though immortal. But his doom reserved him to more wrath, for now the thought both of lost happiness and lasting pain torments him. Round he throws his baleful eyes that witnessed huge affliction and dismay, mixed with obdurate pride and steadfast hate. At once, as far as angels ken, he views the dismal situation, waste and wild, a dungeon horrible, on all sides round as one great furnace flamed. Yet from those flames no light, but rather darkness visible served only to discover sights of woe, regions of sorrow, doleful shades where peace and rest can never dwell, hope never comes that comes to all, but torture without end still urges, and a fiery deluge fed with ever-burning sulphur unconsumed. Such place eternal justice has prepared for those rebellious. Here their prison ordained in utter darkness, and their portion set, as far removed from God and light of heaven as from the centre thrice to the utmost pole. Oh, how unlike the place from whence they fell! There the companions of his fall, o'erwhelmed with floods and whirlwinds of tempestuous fire, he soon discerns, and, weltering by his side, one next himself in power and next in crime, long after known in Palestine and named Beelzebub, to whom the arch-enemy, and thence in heaven called Satan, with bold words, breaking the horrid silence, thus began. If thou beest he, but oh, how fallen, how changed from him who in the happy realms of light, clothed with transcendent brightness, didst outshine myriads though bright. If he, whom mutual league, united thoughts and counsels, equal hope and hazard in the glorious enterprise joined with me once, now misery hath joined in equal ruin. Into what pit thou seest, from what height fallen, so much the stronger proved he with his thunder, until then who knew the force of those dire arms. Yet not for those, nor what the potent victor in his rage can else inflict, do I repent, or change, though changed in outward lustre, that fixed mind, and high disdain from sense of injured merit, that with the mightiest raised me to contend, and to the fierce contentions brought along innumerable force of spirits armed, that durst dislike his reign, and me preferring his utmost power, with adverse power opposed in dubious battle on the plains of heaven, and shook his throne. What though the field be lost? All is not lost. The unconquerable will, and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage, never to submit or yield, and what is else not to be overcome. That glory never shall his wrath or might extort from me. To bow and sue for grace with suppliant knee, and deify his power, who from the terror of this arm so late doubted his empire, that were low indeed. That were an ignominy and shame beneath this downfall, since by fate the strength of gods and this imperial substance cannot fail, since through experience of this great event, in arms not worse, in foresight much advanced, we may, with more successful hope, resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war, irreconcilable to our grand foe, who now triumphs, and in the excess of joy sole reigning holds the tyranny of heaven. So spake the apostate angel, though in pain, vaunting aloud but racked with deep despair, and him thus answered soon his bold compeer. O Prince, O chief of many throned powers, that led the embattled seraphim to war under thy conduct, and in dreadful deeds fearless endangered heaven's perpetual king, and put to proof his high supremacy, whether upheld by strength or chance or fate, too well I see and rue the dire event that, with sad overthrow and foul defeat, hath lost us heaven, and all this mighty host in horrible destruction laid thus low, as far as gods and heavenly essences can perish. For the mind and spirit remains invincible, and vigour soon returns, though all our glory extinct, and happy state here swallowed up in endless misery. But what if he, our conqueror, whom I now of force believe almighty, since no less than such could have o'erpowered such force as ours, have left us this our spirit and strength entire strongly to suffer, and support our pains, that we may so suffice his vengeful ire, or do him mightier service as his thralls by right of war, whate'er his business be, here in the heart of hell to work in fire, or do his errands in the gloomy deep? What can it us avail, though yet we feel strength undiminished or eternal being, to undergo eternal punishment? Whereto, with speedy words the arch-fiend replied, Fallen cherub, to be weak is miserable, doing or suffering. But of this be sure, to do aught good never will be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight, as being the contrary to his high will whom we resist. If then his providence out of our evil seek to bring forth good, our labour must be to pervert that end, and out of good still to find means of evil, which oft times may succeed, so as perhaps shall grieve him, if I fail not, and disturb his inmost counsels from their destined aim. But see, the angry victor hath recalled his ministers of vengeance and pursuit back to the gates of heaven. The sulphurous hail, shot after us in storm, o'erblown hath laid the fiery surge that from the precipice of heaven received us falling, and the thunder, winged with red lightning and impetuous rage, perhaps hath spent his shafts, and ceases now to bellow through the vast and boundless deep. Let us not slip the occasion, whether scorn or satiate fury yielded from our foe. Seest thou yon dreary plain, forlorn and wild, the seat of desolation, void of light, save what the glimmering of these livid flames casts pale and dreadful? Thither let us tend from off the tossing of these fiery waves, there rest, if any rest can harbour there, and, reassembling our afflicted powers, consult how we may henceforth most offend our enemy, our own loss how repair, how overcome this dire calamity, what reinforcement we may gain from hope, if not, what resolution from despair. Thus Satan, talking to his nearest mate, with head uplift above the wave and eyes that sparkling blazed. His other parts besides, prone on the flood, extended long and large, lay floating many a rood in bulk as huge as whom the fables name of monstrous size, Titanian, or earthborn, that warred on Jove, Briareos or Typhon, whom the den by ancient Tarsus held, or that sea beast, Leviathan, which God of all his works created hugest that swim the ocean stream. Him, haply slumbering on the Norway foam, the pilot of some small night-founded skiff, deeming some island, oft as seamen tell, with fixed anchor in his scaly rind, moors by his side under the lee, while night invests the sea and wished morn delays. So stretched out huge in length the arch-fiend lay, chained on the burning lake, nor ever thence had risen, or heaved his head, but that the will and high permission of all-ruling heaven left him at large to his own dark designs, that with reiterated crimes he might heap on himself damnation, while he sought evil to others, and enraged might see how all his malice served but to bring forth infinite goodness, grace, and mercy shown on man by him seduced, but on himself treble confusion, wrath, and vengeance poured. Forthwith upright he rears from off the pool his mighty stature. On each hand the flames, driven backward, slope their pointing spires, and, rolled in billows, leave i' the midst a horrid veil. Then with expanded wings he steers his flight aloft, incumbent on the dusky air that felt unusual weight, till on dry land he lights, if it were land that ever burned with solid as the lake with liquid fire, and such appeared in hue as when the force of subterranean wind transports a hill torn from Pelorus, or the shattered side of thundering Etna, whose combustible and fuelled entrails, thence conceiving fire, sublimed with mineral fury, aid the winds, and leave a singed bottom all involved with stench and smoke. Such resting found the soul of unblessed feet. Him followed his next mate, both glorying to have scaped the Stygian flood as gods, and by their own recovered strength, not by the sufferance of supernal power. Is this the region? This the soil, the clime, said then the lost archangel. This the seat that we must change for heaven? This mournful gloom for that celestial light? Be it so, since he who now is sovereign can dispose and bid what shall be right. Farthest from him is best, whom reason hath equalled, force hath made supreme above his equals. Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors! Hail, infernal world, and thou, profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he whom thunder hath made greater, here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But wherefore let we then our faithful friends, the associates and co-partners of our loss, lie thus astonished on the oblivious pool, and call them not to share with us their part in this unhappy mansion, or once more with rallied arms to try what may be yet regained in heaven, or what more lost in hell. So Satan spake, and him Beelzebub thus answered. Leader of those armies bright, which but the omnipotent none could have foiled, if once they hear that voice, their liveliest pledge of hope in fears and dangers, heard so oft in worst extremes and on the perilous edge of battle when it raged, in all assaults their surest signal, they will soon resume new courage and revive, though now they lie grovelling and prostrate on yon lake of fire, as we erewhile, astounded and amazed. No wonder, fallen such a pernicious height. He scarce had ceased, when the superior fiend was moving toward the shore, his ponderous shield, ethereal temper, massy, large and round behind him cast. The broad circumference hung on his shoulders like the moon, whose orb through optic glass the Tuscan artist views at evening, from the top of Fessole, or in Valdarno to descry new lands, rivers or mountains in her spotty globe. His spear, to equal which the tallest pine hewn on Norwegian hills to be the mast of some great admiral, were but a wand he walked with to support uneasy steps over the burning marl, not like those steps on heaven's azure. And the torrid clime smote on him sore besides, vaulted with fire. Natheless he so endured, till on the beach of that inflamed sea he stood, and called his legions, angel forms, who lay entranced, thick as autumnal leaves that strow the brooks in Vallombrosa, where the Etrurian shades, high overarched, embower, or scattered sedge afloat, when with fierce winds Orion armed hath vexed the Red Sea coast, whose waves o'erthrew Busiris and his Memphian chivalry, while with perfidious hatred they pursued the sojourners of Goshen, who beheld from the safe shore their floating carcasses and broken chariot wheels. So thick bestrown, abject and lost lay these covering the flood, under amazement of their hideous change. He called so loud that all the hollow deep of hell resounded. "Princes, potentates, warriors, the flower of heaven, once yours, now lost, if such astonishment as this can seize eternal spirits. Or have ye chosen this place after the toil of battle to repose your wearied virtue, for the ease you find to slumber here as in the vales of heaven? Or in this abject posture have ye sworn to adore the conqueror, who now beholds cherub and seraph rolling in the flood with scattered arms and ensigns, till anon his swift pursuers from heaven gates discern the advantage, and descending tread us down thus drooping, or with linked thunderbolts transfix us to the bottom of this gulf? Awake, arise, or be forever fallen." They heard, and were abashed, and up they sprung upon the wing, as when men wont to watch on duty, sleeping found by whom they dread, rouse and bestir themselves ere well awake. Nor did they not perceive the evil plight in which they were, or the fierce pains not feel. Yet to their general's voice they soon obeyed innumerable. As when the potent rod of Amram's son in Egypt's evil day waved round the coast, up called a pitchy cloud of locusts warping on the eastern wind, that o'er the realm of impious Pharaoh hung like night, and darkened all the land of Nile. So numberless were those bad angels seen, hovering on wing under the cope of hell, twixt upper, nether, and surrounding fires. Till, as a signal given, the uplifted spear of their great Sultan waving to direct their course, in even balance down they light on the firm brimstone, and fill all the plain. A multitude like which the populous north poured never from her frozen loins to pass Rhine or Danor, when her barbarous sons came like a deluge on the south, and spread beneath Gibraltar to the Libyan sands. Forthwith, from every squadron and each band, the heads and leaders thither haste where stood their great commander. Godlike shapes and forms excelling human, princely dignities, and powers that erst in heaven sat on thrones, though of their names in heavenly records now be no memorial, blotted out and razed by their rebellion from the books of life. Nor had they yet among the sons of Eve got them new names, till, wandering o'er the earth through God's high sufferance for the trial of man, by falsities and lies the greatest part of mankind they corrupted to forsake God their Creator, and the invisible glory of him that made them to transform oft to the image of a brute, adorned with gay religions full of pomp and gold, and devils to adore for deities. Then were they known to men by various names, and various idols through the heathen world. Say, Muse, their names then known, who first, who last roused from the slumber on that fiery couch, at their great emperor's call, as next in worth came singly where he stood on the bare strand, while the promiscuous crowd stood yet aloof. The chief were those who, from the pit of hell, roaming to seek their prey on earth, durst fix their seats long after, next the seat of God, their altars by his altar, gods adored among the nations round, and durst abide Jehovah thundering out of Sion, throned between the cherubim. Yea, often placed within his sanctuary itself their shrines, abominations, and with cursed things his holy rites and solemn feasts profaned, and with their darkness durst affront his light. First, Moloch, horrid king, besmeared with blood of human sacrifice and parents' tears, though for the noise of drums and timbrels loud their children's cries unheard that passed through fire to his grim idol. Him the Ammonite worshipped in Rabbah and her watery plain, in Argob and in Basan to the stream of utmost Arnon. Nor content with such audacious neighbourhood, The wisest heart of Solomon he led by fraud to build his temple right against the temple of God on that opprobrious hill, and made his grove the pleasant valley of Hinnom, Tophet thence and black Gehenna called, the type of hell. Next, Chemos, the obscene dread of Moab's sons, from Aroer to Nebo and the wild of southmost Abarim, in Hesebon and Horonaim, Seon's realm beyond the flowery dale of Sibma clad with vines, and Eleale to the asphaltic pool. Peor, his other name, when he enticed Israel in Sittim. On their next came one who mourned in earnest, when the captive ark maimed his brute image, head and hands lopped off, in his own temple on the Grunsel edge, where he fell flat and shamed his worshippers. Dagon, his name, sea monster, upward man and downward fish. Yet had his temple high reared in Azotus, dreaded through the coast of Palestine, in Gath and Ascalon and Acharon and Gaza's frontier bounds. Him followed Rimmon, whose delightful seat was fair Damascus on the fertile banks of Abana and Pharphar, lucid streams. He also against the house of God was bold. A leper once he lost and gained a king, Ahaz, his sottish conqueror, whom he drew God's altar to disparage and displace for one of Syrian mode, whereon to burn his odious offerings and adore the gods whom he had vanquished. After these appeared a crew who, under names of old renown, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and their train, with monstrous shapes and sorceries, abused fanatic Egypt, and her priests to seek their wandering gods disguised in brutish forms rather than human. Nor did Israel escape the infection, when their borrowed gold composed the calf in Oreb, and the rebel king doubled that sin in Bethel and in Dan, likening his maker to the grazed ox, Jehovah, who in one night when he passed from Egypt marching equalled with one stroke both her firstborn and all her bleating gods. Belial came last, than whom a spirit more lewd fell not from heaven, or more gross to love vice for itself. To him no temple stood, or altar smoked, yet who more oft than he, in temples and at altars when the priest turns atheist, as did Eli's sons, who filled with lust and violence the house of God. In courts and palaces he also reigns, and in luxurious cities, where the noise of riot ascends above their loftiest towers, and injury and outrage. And when night darkens the streets, then wander forth the sons of Belial, flown with insolence and wine. Witness the streets of Sodom, and that night in Gibeah, when the hospitable door exposed a matron to avoid worse rape. These were the prime, in order and in might. The rest were long to tell, though far renowned the Ionian gods, of Javan's issue held gods, yet confessed later than heaven and earth their boasted parents, Titan, heaven's firstborn, with his enormous brood and birthright seized by younger Saturn. He from mightier Jove, his own and Rhea's son, like measure found, so Jove usurping reigned. These first in Crete and Ida known, thence on the snowy top of cold Olympus ruled the middle air, their highest heaven, or on the Delphian cliff, or in Dodona and through all the bounds of Doric land, or who with Saturn old fled over Adria to the Hesperian fields, and o'er the Celtic roamed the utmost isles. All these and more came flocking, but with looks downcast and damp, yet such wherein appeared, obscure, some glimpse of joy, to have found their chief not in despair, to have found themselves not lost in loss itself, which on his countenance cast like doubtful hue. But he, his wonted pride soon recollecting, with high words that bore semblance of worth, not substance, gently raised their fainted courage, and dispelled their fears. Then straight commands, that at the warlike sound of trumpets loud and clarions be upreared his mighty standard. That proud honour claimed Azazel as his right, a cherub tall, who forthwith from the glittering staff unfurled the imperial ensign, which, full high advanced, shone like a meteor streaming to the wind, with gems and golden lustre rich emblazed, seraphic arms and trophies. All the while sonorous metal blowing martial sounds, at which the universal host up sent a shout that tore hell's concave, and beyond frighted the reign of chaos and old night. All in a moment, through the gloom, was seen 10,000 banners rise into the air with orient colours waving. With them rose a forest huge of spears, and thronging helms appeared, and serried shields in thick array of depth immeasurable. Anon they move, in perfect phalanx, to the Dorian mood of flutes and soft recorders, such as raised to height of noblest temper heroes old, arming to battle, and instead of rage deliberate valour breathed, firm, and unmoved with dread of death to flight or foul retreat, nor wanting power to mitigate and swage with solemn touches troubled thoughts, and chase anguish and doubt and fear and sorrow and pain from mortal or immortal minds. Thus they, breathing united force with fixed thought, moved on in silence to soft pipes that charmed their painful steps o'er the burnt soil. And now, advanced in view they stand, a horrid front of dreadful length and dazzling arms, in guise of warriors old, with ordered spear and shield, awaiting what command their mighty chief had to impose. He through the armoured files darts his experienced eye, and soon traverse the whole battalion views, their order due, their visages and stature as of gods, their number last he sums. And now his heart distends with pride, and, hardening in his strength, glories. For never since created man met such embodied force as, named with these, could merit more than that small infantry warred on by cranes, though all the giant brood of Phlegra with the heroic race were joined that fought at Thebes and Ilium, on each side mixed with auxiliar gods, and what resounds in fable or romance of Uther's son, begirt with British and Armoric knights, and all who since, baptized or infidel, jousted in Aspromont or Montalban, Damasco or Morocco or Trebizond, or whom Biserta sent from Afric shore when Charlemagne with all his peerage fell by Fontarabia. Thus far these beyond compare of mortal prowess, yet observed their dread commander. He, above the rest, in shape and gesture proudly eminent, stood like a tower. His form had yet not lost all her original brightness, nor appeared less than archangel ruined, and the excess of glory obscured, as when the sun new risen looks through the horizontal misty air shorn of his beams, or from behind the moon in dim eclipse disastrous twilight sheds on half the nations, and with fear of change perplexes monarchs. Darkened so, yet shone above them all the archangel. But his face deep scars of thunder had entrenched, and care sat on his faded cheek, but under brows of dauntless courage and considerate pride waiting revenge. Cruel his eye, but cast signs of remorse and passion, to behold the fellows of his crime, the followers rather, far other once beheld in bliss, condemned for ever now to have their lot in pain, millions of spirits, for his fault immersed of heaven, and from eternal splendours flung for his revolt. Yet faithful how they stood, their glory withered, as when heaven's fire hath scathed the forest oaks or mountain pines, with singed top their stately growth, though bare, stands on the blasted heath. He now prepared to speak, whereat their doubled ranks they bend from wing to wing, and half enclose him round with all his peers. Attention held them mute. Thrice he essayed, and thrice in spite of scorn, tears, such as angels weep, burst forth. At last words interwove with sighs found out their way. O myriads of immortal spirits! O powers matchless, but with the Almighty! And that strife was not inglorious, though the event was dire, as this place testifies, and this dire change hateful to utter. But what power of mind, foreseeing or presaging from the depth of knowledge past or present, could have feared how such united force of gods, how such as stood like these could ever know repulse? For who can yet believe, though after loss, that all these puissant legions, whose exile hath emptied heaven, shall fail to reascend, self-raised, and repossess their native seat? For me, be witness all the host of heaven, if counsels different or danger shunned by me have lost our hopes. But he who reigns monarch in heaven, till then as one secure, sat on his throne, upheld by old repute, consent, or custom, and his regal state put forth at full, but still his strength concealed, which tempted our attempt, and wrought our fall. Henceforth his might we know, and know our own, so as not either to provoke or dread new war provoked. Our better part remains to work in close design by fraud or guile what force effected not, that he no less at length from us may find, who overcomes by force hath overcome but half his foe. Space may produce new worlds, whereof so rife there went a fame in heaven that he ere long intended to create and therein plant a generation, whom his choice regard should favour equal to the sons of heaven. Thither, if but to pry, shall be perhaps our first eruption. Thither or elsewhere. For this infernal pit shall never hold celestial spirits in bondage, nor the abyss long under darkness cover. But these thoughts, full counsel must mature. Peace is despaired, for who can think submission? War then, war, open or understood, must be resolved. He spake, and to confirm his words out flew millions of flaming swords drawn from the thighs of mighty cherubim. The sudden blaze far round illumined hell. Highly they raged against the highest, and fierce with grasped arms clashed on their sounding shields the din of war, hurling defiance towards the vault of heaven. There stood a hill not far, whose grisly top belched fire and rolling smoke. The rest entire shone with a glossy scurf, undoubted sign that in his womb was hid metallic ore, the work of sulphur. Thither, winged with speed, a numerous brigade hastened, as when bands of pioneers with spade and pickaxe armed, forerun the royal camp to trench a field or cast a rampart. Mammon led them on. Mammon, the least erected spirit that fell from heaven, for even in heaven his looks and thoughts were always downward bent, admiring more the riches of heaven's pavement, trodden gold, than aught divine or holy else enjoyed in vision beatific. By him, first, men also, and by his suggestion taught, ransacked the centre, and with impious hands rifled the bowels of their mother earth for treasures better hid. Soon had his crew opened into the hill a spacious wound, and digged out ribs of gold. Let none admire that riches grow in hell. That soil may best deserve the precious bane. And here let those who boast in mortal things, and wondering tell of Babel and the works of Memphian kings, learn how their greatest monuments of fame and strength and art are easily outdone by spirits reprobate, and in an hour, what in an age they, with incessant toil and hands innumerable, scarce perform. Nigh on the plain, in many cells prepared that underneath had veins of liquid fire sluiced from the lake, a second multitude with wondrous art founded the massy ore, severing each kind and scummed the bullion dross. A third as soon had formed within the ground a various mould, and from the boiling cells by strange conveyance filled each hollow nook. As in an organ, from one blast of wind to many a row of pipes the sound-board breathes, anon out of the earth a fabric huge rose like an exhalation with a sound of dulcet symphonies and voices sweet, built like a temple, where pilasters round were set and Doric pillars overlaid with golden architrave. Nor did there want cornice or frieze with bossy sculptures graven. The roof was fretted gold. Not Babylon, nor great Al-Cairo such magnificence equalled in all their glories to enshrine Belus or Serapis their gods, or seat their kings when Egypt with Assyria strove in wealth and luxury. The ascending pile stood fixed her stately height, and straight the doors, opening their brazen folds, discover wide within her ample spaces or the smooth and level pavement. From the arched roof, pendant by subtle magic, many a row of starry lamps and blazing cressets, fed with naphtha and asphaltus, yielded light as from a sky. The hasty multitude admiring entered, and the work some praise, and some the architect. His hand was known in heaven by many a towered structured high, where sceptred angels held their residence, and sat as princes, whom the supreme king exalted to such power, and gave to rule, each in his hierarchy, the orders bright. Nor was his name unheard or unadored in ancient Greece, and in Orsonian land men called him Mulciber. And how he fell from heaven, they fabled, thrown by angry Jove sheer o'er the crystal battlements. From morn to noon he fell, from noon to dewy eve, a summer's day, and with the setting sun dropped from the zenith like a falling star on Lemnos, the Aegean isle. Thus they relate, erring, for he with this rebellious rout fell long before. Nor aught availed him now to have built in heaven high towers, nor did he scape by all his engines, but was headlong sent with his industrious crew to build in hell. Meanwhile, the winged heralds, by command of sovereign power, with awful ceremony and trumpet sound, throughout the host proclaim a solemn council forthwith to be held at Pandemonium, the high capital of Satan and his peers. Their summons called from every band and squared regiment by place or choice the worthiest. They anon with hundreds and with thousands trooping came attended. All access was thronged, the gates and porches wide, but chief, the spacious hall, though like a covered field where champions bold wont ride in armed, and at the soldan's chair defied the best of Paynim chivalry to mortal combat or career with lance, thick swarmed both on the ground and in the air, brushed with the hiss of rustling wings, as bees in springtime, when the sun with Taurus rides, pour forth their populous youth about the hive in clusters. They among fresh dews and flowers fly to and fro, or on the smoothed plank, the suburb of their straw-built citadel, new rubbed with balm, expatiate and confer their state affairs. So thick the airy crowd swarmed and were straitened, till the signal given, behold, a wonder! They but now who seemed in bigness to surpass earth's giant sons, now less than smallest dwarfs in narrow room throng, numberless, like that Pygmaean race beyond the Indian mount, or fairy elves, whose midnight revels by a forest side or fountain some belated peasant sees, or dreams he sees, while overhead the moon sits arbitress, and nearer to the earth wheels her pale course. They, on their mirth and dance intent with jocund music, charm his ear. At once, with joy and fear his heart rebounds. Thus incorporeal spirits to smallest forms reduced their shapes immense, and were at large, though without number still amidst the hall of that infernal court. But far within, and in their own dimensions like themselves, the great seraphic lords and cherubim in close recess and secret conclave sat, 1,000 demigods on golden seats, frequent and full. After short silence then, and summons read, the great consult began. Book 2, The Argument. The consultation begun, Satan debates whether another battle be to be hazarded for the recovery of heaven. Some advise it, others dissuade. A third proposal is preferred, mentioned before by Satan, to search the truth of that prophecy or tradition in heaven concerning another world and another kind of creature, equal or not much inferior to themselves, about this time to be created. Their doubt who shall be sent on this difficult search. Satan, their chief, undertakes alone the voyage, is honoured and applauded. The council thus ended, the rest betake them several ways, and to several employments as their inclinations lead them, to entertain the time till Satan return. He passes on his journey to hell gates, finds them shut, and who sat there to guard them, by whom at length they are opened, and discover to him the great gulf between hell and heaven. With what difficulty he passes through, directed by chaos, the power of that place, to the sight of this new world which he sought. Book 2. High on a throne of royal state, which far outshone the wealth of Ormus and of Ind, or where the gorgeous East with richest hand showers on her kings barbaric pearl and gold, Satan exalted sat, by merit raised to that bad eminence. And from despair, thus high uplifted beyond hope, aspires beyond thus high, insatiate to pursue vain war with heaven, and by success untaught his proud imaginations thus displayed. Powers and dominions, deities of heaven, for since no deep within her gulf can hold immortal vigour, though oppressed and fallen, I give not heaven for lost. From this descent celestial virtues rising will appear more glorious and more dread than from no fall, and trust themselves to fear no second fate. Me, though just right, and the fixed laws of heaven did first create your leader, next free choice with what besides in council or in fight hath been achieved of merit, yet this loss, thus far at least recovered, hath much more established in a safe, unenvied throne, yielded with full consent. The happier state in heaven, which follows dignity, might draw envy from each inferior, but who here will envy whom the highest place exposes foremost to stand against the thunderer's aim, your bulwark, and condemns to greatest share of endless pain? Where there is, then, no good for which to strive, no strife can grow up there from faction. For none sure will claim in hell precedence, none whose portion is so small of present pain that with ambitious mind will covet more. With this advantage, then, to union and firm faith and firm accord, more than can be in heaven, We now return to claim our just inheritance of old, surer to prosper than prosperity could have assured us. And by what best way, whether of open war or covert guile, we now debate. Who can advise may speak. He ceased, and next him Moloch, sceptred king, stood up, the strongest and the fiercest spirit that fought in heaven, now fiercer by despair. His trust was with the Eternal to be deemed equal in strength, and rather than be less, cared not to be at all. With that care lost went all his fear, of God or hell or worse, he recked not, and these words thereafter spake. My sentence is for open war. Of wiles, more unexpert, I boast not. Them let those contrive who need or when they need, not now. For while they sit contriving, shall the rest, millions that stand in arms and longing wait the signal to ascend, sit lingering here, heaven's fugitives, and for their dwelling place accept this dark, opprobrious den of shame, the prison of his tyranny who reigns by our delay? No. Let us rather choose, armed with hell flames and fury all at once, o'er heaven's high towers to force resistless way, turning our tortures into horrid arms against the torturer. When, to meet the noise of his almighty engine, he shall hear infernal thunder, and for lightning see black fire and horror shot with equal rage among his angels, and his throne itself, mixed with Tartary and sulphur and strange fire, his own invented torments. But perhaps the way seems difficult, and steep to scale with upright wing against a higher foe. Let such bethink them, if the sleepy drench of that forgetful lake benumb not still, that in our proper motion we ascend up to our native seat, descent and fall to us is adverse. Who but felt of late, when the fierce foe hung on our broken rear insulting, and pursued us through the deep, with what compulsion and laborious flight we sunk thus low? The ascent is easy then. The event is feared. Should we again provoke our stronger, some worse way his wrath may find to our destruction, if there be in hell fear to be worse destroyed. What can be worse than to dwell here, driven out from bliss, condemned in this abhorred deep to utter woe, where pain of unextinguishable fire must exercise us without hope of end, the vassals of his anger, when the scourge inexorably and the torturing hour calls us to penance? More destroyed than thus, we should be quite abolished and expire. What fear we then? What doubt we to incense his utmost ire, which, to the height enraged, will either quite consume us and reduce to nothing this essential, happier far than miserable to have eternal being, or, if our substance be indeed divine and cannot cease to be, we are at worst on this side nothing, and by proof we feel our powers sufficient to disturb his heaven, and with perpetual inroads to alarm, though inaccessible, his fatal throne, which, if not victory, is yet revenge. He ended frowning, and his look denounced desperate revenge and battle dangerous to less than gods. On the other side uprose Belial, in act more graceful and humane, a fairer person lost not heaven. He seemed for dignity composed and high exploit, but all was false and hollow. Though his tongue dropped manna, and could make the worse appear the better reason to perplex and dash maturest counsels, for his thoughts were low, to vice industrious, but to nobler deeds timorous and slothful. Yet he pleased the ear, and with persuasive accent thus began. I should be much for open war, O peers, as not behind in hate, if what was urged main reason to persuade immediate war did not dissuade me most, and seemed to cast ominous conjecture on the whole success. When he who most excels in fact of arms, in what he counsels and in what excels mistrustful, grounds his courage on despair and utter dissolution as the scope of all his aim, after some dire revenge. First, what revenge? The towers of heaven are filled with armed watch, that render all access impregnable. Oft on the bordering deep encamp their legions, or with obscure wings scout far and wide into the realm of night, scorning surprise. Or could we break our way by force, and at our heels all hell should rise with blackest insurrection to confound heaven's purest light, yet our great enemy, all incorruptible, would on his throne sit unpolluted, and the ethereal mould, incapable of stain, would soon expel her mischief, and purge off the baser fire victorious. Thus repulsed, our final hope is flat despair. We must exasperate the almighty victor to spend all his rage, and that must end us. That must be our cure, to be no more. Sad cure, for who would lose, though full of pain, this intellectual being, those thoughts that wander through eternity, to perish rather, swallowed up and lost in the wide womb of uncreated night, devoid of sense and motion? And who knows? Let this be good, whether our angry foe can give it, or will ever. How he can is doubtful, that he never will is sure. Will he, so wise, let loose at once his ire, belike through impotence or unaware, to give his enemies their wish, and end them in his anger, whom his anger saves, to punish endless? Wherefore cease we them, say they who counsel war. We are decreed, reserved, and destined to eternal woe. Whatever doing, what can we suffer more? What can we suffer worse? Is this, then, worst? Thus sitting, thus consulting, thus in arms? What, when we fled amain, pursued and struck with heaven's afflicting thunder, and besought the deep to shelter us, this hell then seemed a refuge from those wounds? Or when we lay, chained on the burning lake, that, sure, was worse. What if the breath that kindled those grim fires, awaked, should blow them into sevenfold rage, and plunge us in the flames, or from above should intermitted vengeance arm again his red right hand to plague us? What if all her stores were opened, and this firmament of hell should spout her cataracts of fire, impendent horrors, threatening hideous fall one day upon our heads? While we, perhaps designing or exhorting glorious war, caught in a fiery tempest shall be hurled, each on his rock transfixed, the sport and prey of racking whirlwinds, or forever sunk under yon boiling ocean, wrapped in chains, there to converse with everlasting groans, unrespited, unpitied, unreprieved, ages of hopeless end. This would be worse. War, therefore, open or concealed alike, my voice dissuades. For what can force or guile with him, or who deceive his mind, whose eye views all things at one view? He from heaven's height all these our motions vain sees and derides. Not more almighty to resist our might than wise to frustrate all our plots and wiles. Shall we then live thus vile? The race of heaven thus trampled, thus expelled, to suffer here chains and these torments? Better these than worse, by my advice. Since fate inevitable subdues us, and omnipotent decree the victor's will. To suffer as to do, our strength is equal, nor the law unjust that so ordains. This was at first resolved. If we were wise, against so great a foe contending, and so doubtful what might fall. I laugh when those who at the spear are bold and venturous, if that fail them, shrink and fear what yet they know must follow, to endure exile or ignominy or bonds or pain, the sentence of their conqueror. This is now our doom, which, if we can sustain and bear, our supreme foe in time may much remit his anger, and perhaps thus far removed, not mind us, not offending, satisfied with what is punished. Whence these raging fires will slacken, if his breath stir not their flames. Our purer essence then will overcome their noxious vapour, or inured not feel. Or, changed at length into the place conformed in temper and in nature, will receive familiar the fierce heat, and, void of pain, this horror will grow mild, this darkness light. Besides, what hope the never-ending flight of future days may bring, what chance, what change worth waiting, since our present lot appears for happy, though but ill, for ill not worst, if we procure not to ourselves more woe. Thus Belial, with words clothed in reason's garb, counselled ignoble ease and peaceful sloth, not peace. And after him thus Mammon spake. Either to disenthrone the King of Heaven we war, if war be best, or to regain our own right lost. Him to unthrone we then may hope, when everlasting fate shall yield to fickle chance and chaos judge the strife. The former, vain to hope, argues as vain the latter, for what place can be for us within heaven's bound, unless heaven's Lord supreme we overpower? Suppose he should relent, and publish grace to all on promise made of new subjection. With what eyes could we stand in his presence humble, and receive strict laws imposed, to celebrate his throne with warbled hymns, and to his Godhead sing forced hallelujahs, while he lordly sits our envied sovereign, and his altar breathes ambrosial odours and ambrosial flowers, our servile offerings? This must be our task in heaven, this our delight. How wearisome eternity so spent in worship paid to whom we hate! Let us not then pursue by force impossible, by leave obtained unacceptable, though in heaven, our state of splendid vassalage, but rather seek our own good from ourselves, and from our own live to ourselves, though in this vast recess, free, and an unaccountable preferring hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp. Our greatness will appear then most conspicuous when great things of small, useful of hurtful, prosperous of adverse, we can create, and in what place soe'er thrive under evil, and work ease out of pain through labour and endurance. This deep world of darkness do we dread? How oft amidst thick clouds and dark doth heaven's all-ruling Sire choose to reside, his glory unobscured, and with the majesty of darkness round covers his throne, from whence deep thunders roar, mustering their rage, and heaven resembles hell. As he our darkness, cannot we his light imitate when we please? This desert soil wants not her hidden lustre, gems and gold, nor want we skill or art from whence to raise magnificence, and what can heaven show more? Our torments also may in length of time become our elements, these piercing fires as soft as now severe, our temper changed into their temper, which must needs remove the sensible of pain. All things invite to peaceful counsels, and the settled state of order, how in safety best we may compose our present evils, with regard of what we are and where, dismissing quite all thoughts of war. Ye have what I advise. He scarce had finished, when such murmur filled the assembly as when hollow rocks retain the sound of blustering winds, which all night long had roused the sea, now with hoarse cadence lull seafaring men o'erwatched, whose bark by chance or pinnace anchors in a craggy bay after the tempest. Such applause was heard as Mammon ended, and his sentence pleased, advising peace. For such another field they dreaded worse than hell. So much the fear of thunder and the sword of Michael wrought still within them, and no less desire to found this nether empire, which might rise by policy and long process of time in emulation opposite to heaven. Which when Beelzebub perceived, than whom Satan except none higher sat, with grave aspect he rose, and in his rising seemed a pillar of state. Deep on his front engraven deliberation sat and public care. and princely counsel in his face yet shone, majestic, though in ruin. Sage he stood, with Atlantean shoulders fit to bear the weight of mightiest monarchies. His look drew audience and attention still as night or summer's noontide air, while thus he spake. Thrones and imperial powers, offspring of heaven, ethereal virtues, for these titles now must we renounce, and changing style be called princes of hell. For so the popular vote inclines, here to continue, and build up here a growing empire. Doubtless, while we dream and know not that the King of Heaven hath doomed this place our dungeon, not our safe retreat beyond his potent arm to live exempt from heaven's high jurisdiction, in new league banded against his throne, but to remain in strictest bondage, though thus far removed, under the inevitable curb reserved his captive multitude. For he, to be sure, in height or depth, till first and last will reign sole king, and of his kingdom lose no part by our revolt, but over hell extend his empire, and with iron sceptre rule us here as with his golden those in heaven. What sit we then projecting peace and war? War hath determined us and foiled with loss irreparable. Terms of peace, yet none vouchsafed or sought. For what peace will be given to us enslaved, but custody severe and stripes and arbitrary punishment inflicted? And what peace can we return, but to our power, hostility and hate, untamed reluctance and revenge, though slow, yet ever plotting how the conqueror least may reap his conquest, and may least rejoice in doing what we most in suffering feel. Nor will occasion want, nor shall we need with dangerous expedition to invade heaven, whose high walls fear no assault or siege or ambush from the deep. What if we find some easier enterprise? There is a place, if ancient and prophetic fame in heaven err not, another world, the happy seat of some new race called man, about this time to be created, like to us, though less in power and excellence, but favoured more of him who rules above. So was his will pronounced among the gods, and by an oath that shook heaven's whole circumference confirmed. Thither let us bend all our thoughts, to learn what creatures there inhabit, of what mould or substance how endued, and what their power, and where their weakness. How attempted best, by force or subtlety? Though heaven be shut, and heaven's high arbitrator sit secure in his own strength, this place may lie exposed, the utmost border of his kingdom, left to their defence who hold it. Here, perhaps, some advantageous act may be achieved by sudden onset, either with hell-fire to waste his whole creation, or possess all as our own, and drive as we were driven the puny habitants. Or, if not drive, seduce them to our party, that their God may prove their foe, and with repenting hand abolish his own works. This would surpass common revenge, and interrupt his joy in our confusion, and our joy upraise in his disturbance, when his darling sons, hurled headlong to partake with us, shall curse their frail originals and faded bliss, faded so soon. Advise if this be worth attempting, or to sit in darkness here, hatching vain empires.